My title, and this title is a little bit controversial to me. I don't remember if I came up with this or Finney came up with this or if it just got put on the schedule, but this week I was trying to figure out what I was supposed to be speaking about. And when I saw this title, I thought, that's like kind of cheerleader, like encourage everybody. Let's go, yay, come on, let's go forward. In thinking about it, I have a lot more serious things to say about this message. You know, this title, it begs a whole series of questions, like unifying who? Unifying what? Unifying how? What does unity look like? But at least it tells us, if we can figure those things out, why we should be unifying to go forward. But that begs a whole other series of questions. Where are we going to? Any direction is forward if you don't know where you're going. My dad and I used to hike a lot in Southern California, and he had this goofy sun hat he would wear when we were hiking, and I remember being out with him one time in the Sierra Madres, and he took a big long piece of grass and he stuck it under his hat, sticking out in front of him. And I said, "What is that?" And he said, "That's my compass." I was like, "What do you use it for?" He said, "It tells me which direction I'm going." So any direction's forward if you don't know where you're going. So where are we going? Let's talk about some of these questions. I'm going to start backwards. If we want to talk about going forward, I think it's worth looking back. And I'm going to say something here that sounds like a rhetorical device that preachers use, but I actually want to ask it as a serious question. What brings you to this place today? In all seriousness, like, think back through your life, the choices that you've made and the things that you were following that brought you to be sitting in this room, in this heat today. Why are you here? I hope you understand the significance of that question. If you don't know why you're here, if you don't stop from time to time and think about why am I here, it's hard to know if you've gotten where you were trying to get. In 2006, I had just had my earliest baby. Lazarus was born. And he was my earliest child, and he was very fragile. And while he was fighting for his life in the NICU, we were fighting for our church and whether or not we were going to continue there. And later that year, I left the church that I had started quite a few years earlier. And those weeks, and I would say months, I don't want to exaggerate. I'm going to say there was at least 6 weeks where I wept every single day over leaving my church. Every time I was in the car, every time I was by myself, I would just cry like a baby. Because I invested all my interests, all my hope, all my attention, and all my energy into the church that we were trying to build, and it kind of, for a whole complicated set of reasons, was falling in around me. And I set out from 2006 on a journey, on a quest, to find something. But it wasn't just something I was looking for. I was not just looking for something. I was just not looking for a place to be. I had a very specific set of things that I was looking for. I knew what they were. I had named them in my own mind and in my own heart. I knew exactly what I was looking for, and I knew that I didn't know where to go to find it. Those things that I was looking for, I wanted a people to belong to that were kingdom-oriented in their theology. That means they took the Sermon on the Mount seriously, where they looked at Jesus' words. And I had learned by that time in my life that I needed a group of people that when they read the Sermon on the Mount, they said, how do we do these things the way that he said to do them? I needed a group of people to belong to that was evangelistic, that put a high priority on the gospel and making disciples, and was willing to make whatever decisions needed to be made that didn't harm the gospel to make disciples. A place where it was assimilable, where people from different environments and backgrounds could come and join the church and be a part of the people of God. I needed it to be communitarian. I did not want Sunday, Wednesday Christianity. I wanted a place where I could live with the saints, where I could raise my children around other children, where we could be families together, where someone could look at my life. I didn't want the American dream. I was rejecting and running from the American dream, and I wanted a community where my life could be seen and known so that people could tap me on the shoulder, who could hear close enough to hear my life and see where there were problems, and tap me on the shoulder, and a close enough relationship where they could say, hey, brother, I think you need to consider this and that and the other thing. I needed a community. I needed that community to be sacramental. I knew enough about the scriptures and the early church that it was not an option to be in a place where the grace of the sacraments was not taken seriously. And I needed to be in the city. I needed to be urban because I needed to be in a place where I could interact with enough people to try to make a difference in some lives. And I knew those things went together. I had spent so many years as a street preacher, and I would go into town and I would walk the streets at night and I would preach the gospel to people. I would hang out with drug addicts and where the prostitutes were and where the homeless people were, and then I would go home. And I began to become very, very convinced that the gospel, if I cared about the gospel, I was not a faithful gospel preacher if I couldn't conclude my message of Jesus has come into the world to take upon the sins of the world, to show us a new way to live, and he's resurrected, and through baptism we can enter into his power and be his people. All of that is good and well, but if I could not conclude that message by saying, so, come to my house and see, I had not effectively preached the gospel. I needed to be in a place where there were people in order to do that. So I had an agenda. I was looking for a kingdom, evangelistic, communitarian, sacramental, urban church. Do you know how many of those there were that I knew of in 2006? 0. Maybe there were some that I didn't know of, but I crisscrossed the country, literally crisscrossed the country with my family in a bus, looking for that. By the time I met Finney in 2012, I have told a lot of this story before, so I'm sorry for those of you that know it, but by the time I met Finney in 2012, we were in a meeting together, and he was talking the same way about these issues that I was talking about. And it was the first guy that I had come across that had that whole package, that was looking for all those same things. And I came up to Boston. I came up here for a day. I'd never been in New England. Well, back to that meeting with Finney. After that meeting, I sat down with him. Everybody left. He said, hey, I don't want to just talk about this. I want to move to Boston. I want to do it. Who's interested? And the tumbleweed blew across the table. Nobody was interested. I sat down. I wasn't interested. I sat down on a couch next to Finney, and he said, hey, so it seems like you've thought about this kind of stuff before. And I said, yeah, I've thought a lot about it. He said, could you come to Boston? I said, well, I could do anything I want. Like, I don't have a mortgage. I don't have debt. I'm a free agent. I could do anything, but I've never thought about it. I've never been to Boston, never been interested in Boston. And he said, you should think about it. Providentially, my bus broke down in Pennsylvania, and I was stuck there. And there was a lot of turmoil in the churches there that I didn't want to get involved with. I had friends all over the place. And so it made a lot of sense at that point in my life to spend time on the weekends talking to Finney. We would talk through different portions that he was writing for King Jesus Claims His Church, and sometimes we'd argue, and sometimes we'd agree, and sometimes we'd wrestle back and forth about different texts and ideas. And he finally said, why don't you come up to Boston? And I said, okay, I'll come up, but I want to just, Finney was working at a different place then, this is before Eventide, and he said, I told him, I want to come up and I want to just walk around the city by myself. I want to see the city, I want to get the vibe. He said, that's great. Just come up to South Station. You can bring a train. And at the end of the day, we'll meet up and we'll go to my house and you can spend the weekend up here with me. And I spent half a day traveling around Boston. I'd never been here before, didn't know anything about the city. I just came into South Station and I would go down a hole and get on a train, and I would get off when I felt like getting off, and I would go up and walk around, and I'd see what there was to see, and I'd go back down a hole, and I'd get on another train, no idea where I'm going, and I'd walk around. And it was about half a day that I was here, and it occurred to me, why is this such a weird place? I've been in a lot of cities. I'm a lover of cities by this point in my life. I love urban areas. Like, I enjoy the city. But it was a very strange city to me, and I was like, what is it about this place that seems so weird? And it dawned on me about lunchtime. I hadn't hardly seen any trash. I hadn't seen any homeboys. I hadn't seen any skinheads. I hadn't seen any punk rockers. I hadn't even seen any homeless people. I hadn't seen any of the people that I'm used to seeing in a city this size. And that night when I talked to Finney, I told him, I said, man, I don't know. I don't know if this is the place for me. Like, I am not the guy for finance bros. Like, I don't have a message for them. I don't know how to do that. It's not my cup of tea. And he said, no, I don't think you're thinking about this right. There's people here for you and for a ministry that you'd be interested in. I really think you should reconsider it. And I spent the weekend, and by this point, I did love Finney and Laura. I cared very much for them. And when I went home from that trip, I told Erica all these things, my discoveries about this city. For anybody who's listening to this later, there are homeless people and there are problems in Boston. It just is a little bit harder to find than in some cities. But when I went home to Erica and I said, I don't know, babe, I don't know about Boston. It's a little refined for us. And as we prayed about it and thought about it, the reason that we changed our minds is that I did a mental exercise. I said, what do I want? What do I want my life to be about? What do I want my time in the kingdom of God to be filled with? I'm tired of traveling, I know that. I'm tired of running my children around like a gypsy in a bus. I want a people and a place. And when I considered these 5 things, I need a place where they're serious about the kingdom. They're serious about Jesus' teachings on economics. They're serious about his teachings on holiness. They're serious about his teachings on the poor. They're serious about his teachings on divorce. They're serious about all these things that Jesus said. I was thinking of Christianity in the terms of a pie chart. And when I cut out that section of the pie that's for the kingdom, that pie chart's a lot smaller. And now, out of this piece of the pie that's the kingdom of Christianity in America, I also want an evangelistic community. Well, now my piece of the pie just got a little bit smaller. And I want it to be sacramental. Ooh, now it just got really small. And I want it to be communal. And now it's very, very small. And now I want it to be urban. And I realized the size of that pie was me and Erica. And I said, I don't feel a Macedonian call to Boston. I've not woken up in a dream and heard the people of Boston saying, come and bring us the gospel. But I have spent my whole life trying to create a certain set of values. And I cannot imagine finding them anywhere else. And if I don't say yes to this proposition that's fallen in my lap that I didn't arrange, I will probably regret it for the rest of my life. And that was one of the wisest decisions that I ever made. I was right. I would have regretted it for the rest of my life if I had said no. And what I was saying yes to was a series of propositions that were a priority for me in my Christian life. That's how I made that decision. It's 18 years later now since I set out on that journey. And I happen to be situated with my children and my children's children in a community that is kingdom-oriented, evangelistic, communitarian, sacramental, and urban. And for all of the shipwrecks that I've seen, and for all the failure that I have been a part of and witnessed, that's an amazing thing to be able for me to say. It means an incredible amount to me. We have had some important successes as a community. It turns out that our thesis about the Eucharist is true. It changes lives. It feeds our souls. It makes us family. It causes us to grow. It stabilizes our natural families, and it creates a community, and it's attractive to people who are seeking. That was a proposition 18 years ago. I'm happy to report it's a fact now. It works. Together, we have helped shape, together, not me, us, we have helped shape a new dimension in the conversations that are being had in conservative Christian circles about what the Lord is doing in the church through the sacraments. That's a conversation that people are having today in ways that were never being had just 18 and 20 years ago. And I don't mean that we've made such a good point that everybody has seen the light and agrees with us. I just mean that it's being talked about now in circles that it never would have been if we weren't here practicing those things and living them out in a way that caused people to wonder, hey, maybe it could be. When I was traveling, those years, I went to a lot of different churches. I was in a lot of Anabaptist churches. I was in a lot of charity churches. I was in a lot of Baptist churches. I was in a lot of churches. And among the churches where I was most comfortable, they were also the most white. And it bothered me and it discouraged me because I could not accept the premise that the gospel of Jesus Christ was primarily for Germans. I did not accept that premise. And a part of my intention and rationale in coming to urban areas was that we could prove that the church was still for every kindred and nation and tribe. That we could have diverse churches with people from all kinds of different backgrounds who had one common Lord and one common purpose together. And it turns out that is also true. We have proven together that urban areas are the white fields that Jesus told us were ready for harvest. And we did all these things together. I can't emphasize this enough that I don't even mean just us here in Boston. I mean all of you who have put your hand to these plows, who have said, let's give these things a try. We have proven the merit of these propositions together. And we needed to do it together because me and Finney sitting on a Skype call doesn't prove anything. It's only an idea until a group of people are willing to put it into flesh and put it into practice and see if it actually produces what you think it's going to produce. It's necessary that the church's ideals and goals and doctrines and practices are put in place through a group of people so that it can become manifest to the world what God actually wants to do. I forgot about my slides. But here's where we're at. I only have a few. One of the things that we have proven most clearly is the value of our table fellowship. It is an enormous success to me that there are dozens of us who live day by day for the value and the privilege and the honor and the joy of coming together around the Lord Jesus' table and breaking bread and sharing our lives together. This, if my life amounts to nothing more than this, I will be happy. But I'm asking myself today, is this all there is? Now, this is not a little thing. This picture, in fact, is very important to me. This is my most recent Pascha service with the Oakland congregation. A year before this picture, my last Pascha was the beginning of the end for a bunch of us to go through some very, very difficult, trying, and hard times. And this picture represents a restoration of many, many things in my personal life and for my family. It represents the ability to go on. It represents the ability to trust again and to grow again and to open up again and to keep moving forward. And so when I say, is this all, I don't mean to diminish what I'm picturing here. This is very important to all of us, but I'm worried that perhaps we have made too good of an argument. Perhaps we have proven our point too much, because what I'm seeing and what I'm afraid of is that we have become so comfortable and so enmeshed and so blessed by our table fellowship that we have forgotten how to put our heads up and look above and beyond that place. Is this mission accomplished? Is this all that you want and all that you need? Is your local table where you break bread with people that you know, is that the culmination of your Christian experience? Is that everything there is for us to do? Let me tell you a story about midwives. Do you know I'm a midwife? The ugliest midwife you've ever seen. Elijah was our first baby that was born at home, and we had a midwife. We had Hannah at a hospital, and we had Chloe at a hospital, and Elijah was our first home birth. And Elijah ended up in the hospital. In those days in my life, Eric and I really wrestled with the proposition of faith and medicine. It was a very difficult thing for us to discern. We wrestled a lot with those issues. How does faith affect our health? How do we make decisions that are honoring to God? How do we engage with systems in the world around us? And I was a bit more of a reductionist back in those days. And after Elijah was born, we had moved into home birth at that time in our life because the premise that I was reading and thinking about in a lot of different books and in a lot of different environments that we were studying, the idea was that pregnancy is not a sickness. Hospitals are for sickness, but pregnancy isn't a sickness. Pregnancy is a life event. It's not a sickness. So why do we put pregnant people with the sick people? That doesn't make sense. So keep pregnancies home where life events happen. That was our thinking at this time. And we were encouraged in this thought by the midwife community, especially in Oregon with a lot of home birth midwives. This is something that's very readily discussed in home birth and midwife circles. And they made their case too well. Because after Elijah was born and we came home from the hospital and we got pregnant again, I said to myself, if pregnancy is not a sickness and we don't need to have babies in hospitals, why do I need a midwife? And so Hosanna was born with me as the midwife. And we had a few more babies that way. But I'll cue you in to the rest of the story by saying that we did need the hospitals. We actually very much needed the hospitals. I told you about Lazarus. He is named Lazarus because he was dead 3 times before he was born. We had gone to ultrasound after we had been assured twice now that our baby was passed. And we had gone to an ultrasound to examine Erica's uterus and find out what the damage and what the problem was that caused us to lose our child. And it's very stark memory to me, when you go in for an ultrasound, usually they flip on the machine and they move the wand around and there's a bunch of static until something kind of emerges out of the static on the screen. But this is not what happened when we went to this ultrasound appointment. As soon as they flipped the machine on, there was a crystal clear picture of a baby who seemed to be, for all intents and purposes, perfectly well. So in my grieving state, in my wife's grieving state, lo and behold, there happens to be a child. But that child, after he was born at 32 weeks, spent a lot of time in the hospital. And we have had a lot of interactions in the medical world where we have been extremely grateful for the care that we have been able to have from very conscientious medical practitioners. And now you would have never convinced 25-year-old Matthew of this, but now I have the honor of having many, many friends who are in the medical community, and I respect and admire very much. This is the degree to which we change and mature over the years. And I am advocating, I am trying to convince you all that something like this maturity is what we need to do as a community of people. That we need to grow past our narrow vision of being blessed with our table fellowship and look at the bigger picture of what the church is supposed to be doing in the world and what we collectively can and should accomplish for the gospel of Jesus Christ that is bigger than our living rooms. And I am a fan of the Christian living room. I am a fan of the Christian table, and you all know me well enough to know how much I mean that. But I am at the place now where it is not enough. It is not enough just to have tables where we fellowship well, where we grow individually. We have a purpose and a calling as a community and as a community of communities that is much larger than any of us can accomplish on our own. It's wrong to think that if I have my table and it works the way I want it to, that everything else can come and go. You may believe that, you may not. I have been with a lot of people in our numbers over the last 2 years. I have sat in meetings in my own tables in the last couple of years where we have said things like, well, I know there are problems in the church, but as long as we keep communicating well and keep celebrating the Eucharist well and keep being open with each other, we will be fine. We did not, after all, turn out to be fine. It's not true. It's not nearly as fruitful as we could be together. And more importantly than pragmatism, I don't think it's what the Lord wants. And maybe almost as important, I do think it's what our enemy wants. I do believe that the Lord wants our unity and our collaboration and our common outputs together. And I do believe that our enemy wants to separate and divide and break us apart. If we're unifying to go forward, I think going forward means finding the path together to continue to grow and expand God's kingdom. We say often, and I am glad that we do, we cite the Lord's Prayer regularly as groups of people. We stand, we kneel, and we recite what the Lord told us to pray. Our Father who art in heaven. And that prayer ends, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. What does that mean, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven? Is heaven divided? Is heaven scattered? Is heaven broken? Our job, our mission, our purpose together is to create heavens on earth. That outside of our places, we create these little spaces, these little bubbles of heaven on earth. And we want them to expand and consume more and more of the people, place, and area around us. We want them to have more and more influence so that we can continue to pray and say and mean, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, where when you speak, people obey. When you send, they go, and when you call, they come. Turn with me to John chapter 17. I want to read through this starting in verse 6. I have manifested thy name unto the men which thou gavest me out of the world. Thine they were, and thou gavest them me. And they have kept thy word. Now they have known that all things whatsoever thou hast given me are of thee. For I have given unto them the words which thou gavest me. And they have received them, and have known surely that I came out from thee, and they have believed that thou didst send me. I pray for them. I pray not for the world, but for them which thou hast given me, for they are thine. And all mine are thine. And thine are mine, and I am glorified in them. And now I am no more in the world, but these are in the world, and I come to thee. Holy Father, keep through thine own name those whom thou hast given me, that they may be one as we are. While I was with them in the world, I kept them in thy name. Those that thou gavest me I have kept, and none of them is lost, but the son of perdition, that the scriptures might be fulfilled. And now come I to thee. And these things I speak in the world, that they might have my joy fulfilled in themselves. I have given them thy word, and the world hath hated them, because they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. I pray not that thou shouldst take them out of the world, but that thou shouldst keep them from the evil. They are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth. As thou hast sent me into the world, even so have I also sent them into the world. And for their sakes I sanctify myself, that they also might be sanctified through the truth. Neither pray I for these alone, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word, that they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me. And the glory which thou gavest me I have given them, that they may be one, even as we are one. I in them, and thou in me, that they may be made perfect in one, and that the world may know that thou hast sent me, and hast loved them as thou hast loved me. There's a few passages that I read in the Bible from time to time that really grip me and convict me. And this is one of them. It's like that passage that says, if you ask anything in my name, you should receive it. Because there's such a discrepancy between my experience and what I see Jesus saying. And those are the places that I hate. I hate when I don't live up to what God says. I hate when we fall short. I hate when I know that He has an expectation, when I understand His will, and we're not doing it. It seems impossible, right? There's so many questions that this begs. Like, how people ask me all the time about unity, Christian unity. What does it mean? What do we do? How do we get it? We looked at the charts that Finney put up yesterday. You got ecclesiastical models, you got Presbyterian models, you have all these different models of church, all these different theological backgrounds, all these different groups of people, all these different practices. We have 2,000 years worth of heresy and schism and division. And we come to this text and I ask myself, and people ask me from time to time, how are we supposed to unify? What does it mean to unify? And the honest answer to the question, how do we unify with the Baptists that meet in this church, or the people down the street, or the everyday person that I meet who calls himself a Christian, and I have some reason to believe that he may be, how do we unite? And the sad answer to the question is, I don't know. I don't know how to resolve all of those problems. But one thing that I do know, in this room, with these people who I do know, who we have almost exactly the same ideas, beliefs, values, doctrines, and practices, if we can't make unity here, it's an absurd idea to think that I'm ever going to figure out how to have unity outside of here. It has to start here with us, and it has to start with us prioritizing our unity and holding it as precious and dear and valuable for the sake of our King, so that we can accomplish what He has called us to do. We're supposed to be an example of what God intended the world to look like. We're supposed to be the reconcilers. We're supposed to be the forgivers. We're supposed to be the repenters. We're supposed to be those who live in harmony and peace. We're supposed to be those who know how to undo evil and wrong, first in each other and then in the world, through our common commitment and love and unity. That's what we're supposed to be. And why aren't we? Well, I know why we are. I know why I'm not. Because I get tired and I get frustrated and I get hurt and upset and wounded and worn out and tired of trying. And you start to think, it's this little kernel that starts in the back of your mind. Maybe it'd be easier just to go my own way. Maybe it'd be easier just to go my own way. Maybe we'd be better off if we went our own way. Why do we need to put up with this? I don't need to put up with this. I'm tired of putting up with this. And that little idea grows and grows and grows until we split and divide. I have seen many more examples of schism and division in my Christian experience than unity and love and mercy and sacrifice. And it shames me. And I'm afraid, not of failure, because I've failed lots of times. I'm not afraid of failure. I'll take failure anytime, because I know that with the right attitude, failure just means you got one less thing to try to do wrong. I'm not afraid of failure. I'm afraid of failing what Jesus wants us to do. I'm afraid of going wrong when he told us how to go right. I'm afraid of division. And I'm afraid of schism. I'm afraid of breaking into small little pieces where we all go our own way and we start over again, and then we break again, and then we all go our own way again, and then we grow again, and then we break again, and then we all go our way again, and I am not going to do that for the rest of my life. We're supposed to be people who don't operate based on fear and coercion and power imbalances and all the ugly things. The ugly things that men produce and tell themselves are not ugly. It's not supposed to be that way with us. Why do people get married? I don't know if you look around, there's kind of a sentiment about people relishing their old age singleness. I don't mean specifically in the church, I just mean in social media and regular media and demographics and statistics about how few people are getting married these days and how much people enjoy their lives on their own terms. There's a market in the world where sex is relatively cheap and easy and low commitment, and there's money to be made, and why bother having to be tied down with somebody else's expectations for your life? And so people are flaunting their singleness, their aloofness from marriage. And it's an interesting testimony to the power of marriage that even when I was a heathen, marriage changed me. As much as some people would like for it to happen, it just doesn't go away. There's something deep inside of us that recognizes that I'm better off being married. And what is that thing? That thing is that there's something about a durable, permanent commitment that we recognize in our heart, if not in our heads, at least in our heart, that if I had a partner, I would not only have companionship, but I would have the ability to do more than I could do on my own. So marriage seems to have this durable value that people keep, it kind of emerges out of its own, out of nowhere, in the hearts of men. And they keep doing it. But then you wonder, well, why bother having children? Okay, you found a partner, now you can buy a better house, you can have better finances, you can take better vacations, you can drive a better car. There's a lot of things you could do if it's just you and your partner. And the same logic applies. Why bother tying myself down to these tiny humans that are so needy and require so much work and so much whatever? But here again, we find the same thing. There's something indomitable in the heart of men and women that just continues to be drawn, compelled even, to want to have children. Where does it come from? Well, there's that same kind of thing inside of all of us that we know having children extends. My life is temporary. I have X amount of years, and I don't even know what X is. But through children, through family, I can extend my life, my legacy, my goals, my values into the future. I can create a link to something beyond myself through my own children. And that's motivating. It's worth the risk of pain and financial loss and all the other things that come along, and the difficulty, the tired, sleepless nights, all the things that come along. And not only do people have a child, but they have another one and another one and another one. And some of us another and another and another and another and another. Okay, so there's a rationale for getting married. There's a rationale for having children. Why don't we just move out into the woods of Montana and carve out our little place of our little kingdom of our own, our little place in the woods where we can be a happy little family and do our happy little family stuff and get along with ourselves and not have to worry about other people and not have to worry about the world and not have to worry about all the problems and everything that goes on. Why don't all of us just gravitate into our own little corner of the world where we can have absolute control and we can manage every aspect of our lives and live in peace, prosperity, and wellness for all of our days? Because there's something inside of us that says, I need people. I am a people, and I need people. I need society. I need interaction. I need to be involved in something bigger. So we have towns and villages and cities and metropolises. Well, why be a part of the church? Why be a part of the church? I can have my little family. I can live with some neighbors. I can come and go as I please. Why should I be tied down to the expectations and the burdens and the work and the trouble of other people's mess and problems and lives? Because I know there's something in the group of us together that means more than me alone. The same rationale that applies to choosing a partner is the same rationale that applies to having children, is the same rationale that applies to joining the church, is the same rationale on up the chain in these tiers of relationships. It's literally the way that God made the world. That we're supposed to continue in these progressions. We're little pieces of big parts. I am an individual in a marriage, in a family, in a congregation, in a church, in a group of churches. And all of the rationale that tells me why my life is better, taking my family into a family of families. What is that rationale? I have a more durable safety net. I have people who care about me. I have people I care about. We can share resources when there's needs. There's someone to help when I'm in danger. There's someone to help when I'm hurting. I can help other people, and that has meaning and value as a Christian. We have more resources together as a group than I do individually. We can meet others' needs. We can produce enough that we have more than we need collectively, and we can pour into other people. I have a very small number of gifts and abilities, and if I link my life to other people, then we have many more potential strengths and skills and abilities. And there's mechanisms in the scriptures that allow us to grow so we can equalize our weaknesses and grow from them. We can use each other and leverage our community, leverage our relationships, and become better people over time and become even more productive. For who? For the kingdom of God. For our King, who is organizing a nation on earth. And how big are his ambitions? How much does Jesus want to accomplish with his people on the earth? When you ask yourself that question, does it fit at one table? It doesn't. As great as he is, are his ambitions for his gospel. I'm coming to an end here. I came across something that could have been written by followers of the way. Let me just read it quickly to you. I'm sorry to read something. I hate reading from the pulpit, but just listen. It matters. The same is true for those of us who have been drawn into Christian communities. We are finding that the Lord brought us together for a larger purpose. He's asking our communities to reach out and link up with other communities, form networks, understand our identity, and become a people of God. This uniting is an old theme in the church with a new urgency, an urgency that is brought by the Lord's call and confirmed by our circumstances. It's the formation of a self-conscious people distinct from the prevailing culture. It's not a new denomination, but something that bridges the divisions between denominations. The organization of a kingdom of people with a different allegiance, different basis, and different goals than those of secular society around it. It's a visible underground, an alien people who are emerging from rather than dissolving into the melting pot. For a long time, Christians have believed that they were living in a Christian culture, tainted, of course, by sin and sinners who hadn't yet been transformed, but basically good. Their Christian vocation was to proclaim their faith and abstain from sin. But was there ever a Christian world culture? At best, the world has been influenced and evil restrained by the church's presence acting as salt. The biblical view of the kingdom is consistently that of an alien culture within the world, never synonymous with the world. As the church recaptures the vision of being a distinctive people, our vocation becomes more than preaching and individual righteous living. We are hearing God's call to unite, to become one, to work at tearing down the barriers which separate all true believers. To develop a subculture, there must be interaction, and for there to be interaction, there must be proximity. And that's happening too. Christians are choosing to live near each other, entering into relationships and commitments that allow God to forge a visible society. It's no longer enough to meet on Sunday morning in a beautiful sanctuary, sing some songs, and hear words of inspiration. It's no longer enough to have an annual crusade to convert the lost. If God is building a society, there must be responsibility for each other, accountability to each other, and self-consciousness as a people, and that is happening. This aspect of God's plan found new life with the development of Christian communities, and it's influencing the more traditional churches where members are establishing relationships with other members. Older Christians are discipling younger Christians, teaching them how to live in the kingdom, helping them with their problems. Pastoral responsibility is being shared and focusing on the task of nurturing a flock of God's people. But even more outstanding, during the last 5 years, God has been leading these groups to reach out to one another. People who have learned the value of deep commitment to each other within the community could envision the same kind of relationship between communities, and they begin to draw together. Well, that's almost exactly what I'm trying to say here tonight. I could have written that. I mean, I might not have written it so well, but the ideas are exactly what I'm trying to say. He says also, the same is true for those of us who have been drawn into Christian communities. We are finding that the Lord brought us together for a larger purpose. He's asking our communities to reach out and link up with other communities. Oh, sorry, that's right here. He also says this. Becoming as perfectly one as Jesus was with the Father involves far more than arriving at agreement about religious doctrine. Unity in our understanding of the truth is important because serious disagreements can create separation. In the same prayer, Jesus asked that we'd be sanctified or purified in the truth, but much of our disunity, listen, much of our disunity is not over such serious disagreements that we could not get together if we each were willing to be molded by the Spirit of truth, and if each of us made that preparation for unity our top priority. But Jesus' unity is far more than unity on issues. It's a relationship commitment, throwing our lives together, becoming a people of God rather than persons of God. But Jesus' unity is far more. Will we make ourselves available so God may answer Jesus' prayer, or will we cancel his order by insisting on our independence? In the last few years, I have heard from hundreds of small groups of Christians who are wanting to begin community. However, many times they want advice rather than supervision and relationship from established communities. They want to do it their way in the place of their choosing. We have seen that attitude result in slow growth and frequent tragedies. The independent spirit of groups who insist on doing community on their own is sometimes only one step removed from the individualism that keeps other folks from trying community at all. An affirmative response to Jesus' will that we come together has several levels of surrender and almost always involves giving up some of our independence. There is the giving of ourselves to relationships with other believers and commitments that cannot be dissolved. But there is also the giving up of our group to other groups. That's a further surrender because more may be asked of us. We might be asked to give ourselves to many needy strangers, or those with more experience may discern that our group doesn't really have what it takes to make it alone. And they may recommend that we all move and join with God's people elsewhere to learn and strengthen forces there. This book, I collect some weird old books. I don't even remember where I found this, but this is by a former elder at Reba Place in Evanston, Illinois, and it was written in 1978. And the thesis for this book, if that name sounds familiar, I very often recommend another book by Dave Jackson called Dial 911. I think the subtitle is something like Stories of Nonviolent People in a Violent Community. It's one of the best books I've ever read on practical nonviolence in an urban area. But this is another one of his books, and the thesis of this book, him and his wife wrote a book called Living Together that was a manual for how to live in community. And after some time, they started to recognize what I've just been talking about here, that God was not just calling them to community, calling individuals to community, but he was calling communities into community. Where the same rationale and logic for my participation in a local community also applies to my community's rationale to be a part of broader communities. The exact same reasons and rationale. Increase in output, increase in efficiency, increase in resource, increase in durability, all of those things. He says there seems to be no decline of interest in closer Christian fellowship. Let me say to that end, this is 1978, okay? I don't know how many dozens of emails a year. You all don't hear a lot of this stuff. It comes to my office and I answer emails from followers away all the time. But I get dozens of emails a year asking about Christian community and what we're doing in Boston and where people can be a part. And so I can say with Dave Jackson in 1978, there seems to be no decline of interest in closer Christian fellowship. But while we have heard of many communities established, many others have failed. I can also say that. And those that have collapsed, there has often been great pain and hurt because people had risked the vulnerability of putting their lives on the line. This is my last slide. Certain communities fail while others succeed. Why? 3 commitments are most critical. The willingness of the community to accept oversight, the quality of leadership, and the nature and depth of these members' commitment to the Lord. The risk is so great in starting a brand new community that we have a standard bit of advice. Don't try to start your own. Go where it's already happening. Submit yourself there and learn. Then later, if the Lord wants you to be a part of starting a community, the idea can have adequate testing, support, and oversight. Communities that are planted by other communities have the highest rate of survival. Dave Jackson, Coming Together. If I had more time, I would talk more specifically about what we can accomplish together. If I had more time, I would talk about some of the things that we could implement in coming together. If I had more time, I would talk about some of the things that are keeping us from coming together. But I don't have that time. We'll return to it another time if we can. But it's enough today to leave with you, to leave on your heart and your mind. What are you after? I would encourage each of you to do that exercise that I did in 2006. Ask yourself what you want. Give yourself a limit. Like, you can't write a book. Pick 5 things. Prioritize your life. Prioritize your values. What are the 5 most important things for you in your Christian life? And write them down. Take some time. Think about it. And then ask yourself if you have those things. And if you do have those things, ask yourself how valuable they really are to you. What's it worth compromising or not having in order to have those things? And I think you'll find direction and strength. This is a challenging message to me. Because I recognize how fortunate I am and how very good God has been to me and to my family. How very well He has cared for me and led me in the way that I've gone. And I fear, I wonder, I ask myself, have I been careful enough with it? Have I done right by what He's done for me? Have I prioritized the people that God's put in my life enough to be able to say, I really do see what you've done for me, Lord. I really am being careful and not wasteful and not hurtful and not harmful to the things that you're trying to produce in my life. And there are some specific places where I haven't been, where I failed in. But I don't want to. And I want your grace and your mercy so that we can keep building together what God has created out of us. So that we can keep pushing forward the agenda of the kingdom of God. So that we can continue to promote and glorify and exalt the name of Jesus on the earth. So that we can continue to pray and mean with all of our heart, Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth as